Hey, what's going on, traders? Happy Tuesday. I hope you guys were all able to end green today, and I want to thank you guys so much again for taking the time out of your day to go ahead and watch my recap. But as usual, I'm going to let you guys know exactly how my day trading went and, whether I was able to make or lose money today. And so just a friendly reminder, right? I am trading on a simulation account this week, as you guys can tell on the top left, right? I want to make it very clear I am not using real money this week. So yeah, let's go ahead and get right into today's recap. So as you guys can tell, I had a total of 19 orders today, right? And I ended up on the day $4, right? So it was a pretty crazy day for me in general, and I'm gonna go ahead and explain to you guys what led to me making $67 on TQs and what ultimately led to me losing $63 on SQQQ. And so as we see on my filled orders, right, I started off the day trading at around 7:10 a.m. and that's when I bought into TQQQ. And so ultimately, right, we are looking at the NASDAQ on the 1 day, 1 minute chart. And pretty much what we were noticing is, all of pre-market hours, this thing was indicating signs of an uptrend, right? It bounced off the middle VWAP here, started to make these higher highs and higher lows, right? And then ultimately, as we approach the market open, right around this area here, right, where you see the increase in volume, the NASDAQ started to absolutely rip on the day, right? So it started to push up very aggressively and use the EMA line as a support, right? So as you guys can see, it was making these higher lows and higher highs. And so when did I decide to buy in? Well, I bought in when direction was really in my favor, right? So I waited for this thing to choose, which way it was going to be headed on the day, and ultimately I saw this thing was validating the EMA line as a support and continuously making these higher highs and higher lows, right? And so what that told me is I should probably be paying attention to TQQQ because direction is in its favor, right? So as you guys can tell, I bought in at around 7:10 a.m., right? And I just continuously started to average up into it. So as this thing pushed up, right, I bought in at 7:10. So I waited for this thing to push up, right? The momentum was still there. I waited for it to pull back a bit. And as it approached the EMA line here, right, as it was doing so previously before, where it would push up, pull back, push up, pull back, push up, pull back, push up. As it pulled on back, I bought in, right? And I started to average up in small little increments, right? As you guys can tell, I initially bought in with 100 shares, decided to add another 100, another 100, and then my last set of shares, right? So I was using a total of $10,000 to trade today, and I was buying in increments of, roughly around $2,000, $2,500. And so as I bought in, right, I averaged up as it was going my way, and you guys can tell I sold, a decent amount at 712, right? So 712 is pretty much almost at its highs. So as this thing was, approaching its previous resistance level, I decided it would be in my best interest to lock in majority of my trade there, or at least start selling off some shares. Well, why would I want to do that? Well, it's previously been rejected around here before, right? And this thing wasn't, uptrending as fast as it was in the morning, right? So I felt like it started to lose a little steam. I cut some of my shares there. I was happy that I did because as you guys will notice, right, this thing did start to pull on back a bit, right? And so then I actually decided to load up a bit one more time. So I sold out of some of the shares, right? I was in with 443 shares. I sold out of 243. And then as I saw it start to indicate signs of a bounce again, I decided to get in aggressive again, right? So as you guys can tell, this thing actually ended up getting rejected, fell below EMA, and as it started to find support and break above it again, that's when I really started to step on the gas again, right? So at 722 and 734, I bought back in. So 722 was actually a little before confirmation, right? So I was taking that risk as I saw it trying to form a support right around this area, right? I bought in with another 100 shares. As this thing started to finally break above EMA and indicate signs of an uptrend, I added some more. And then what you guys will notice is I was able to sell majority of my position at a pretty good time, right? So I sold 200 shares at 741. So 741 is literally right around when it's about to break out and make these higher highs. I decided I was going to load off, right? Because of the fact that it got rejected right around this resistance area before, right? And actually broke below EMA. So I didn't want to risk this thing, potentially breaking out. But if I didn't lock it in and this thing sold off, I would just lose everything, right? So I decided to lock in majority of my trade up here. And this is where things went wrong on the day, right? So as you guys can tell, I was doing a good job of going with direction. And what you guys will notice is I didn't sell out of my remaining 100 shares here until over 2 hours later, right? So I let 100 shares ride. The reason why is I was trading with 443 shares, right? So as this thing continued to uptrend, I cut majority of my trade somewhere where I thought it made sense. And ultimately, this thing completely got rejected and started to change direction on the day, right? So this is very important why we go ahead and load off on shares at areas that, it's approaching resistance level. And because of this exact reason. So I held the last 100 shares and I didn't cut losses until literally it broke below middle VWAP. So I literally wrote the 100 shares that I bought in from up here right all the way down to down here. So I lost a decent amount, over 3% just on those shares alone. And imagine I wouldn't have, loaded off my shares up here and wrote everything down here. I would have been in a huge mess. But the fact that I managed, my position size and was able to reduce most of my position at these previous levels, as it did start to pull on back, and I did ultimately cut losses down here, right on the last 100 shares, it actually ate up all the profit I made. So up around this area, I was up almost $70 to $80 on the day, believe it or not. But as this thing started to go south and I cut my last 100 shares, right, I actually gave back all the profit. Now, just imagine, as I mentioned, how bad of a spot I would have put myself in if I hadn't even, decided to load off on shares up here. So that's, why it's very important to load off in areas where you think there could be an aggressive pullback. And, that's exactly what we ended up seeing. There was a clear direction. It started to consolidate, no longer trade, that way. And then it ultimately just changed direction. Well, I ended up selling all the way off to below middle VWAP. And why did I decide to finally cut my shares there? In all honesty, guys, I should have cut the shares at break below this area here. At break below 11,618, right? I saw it as a previous support level. I saw this thing starting to consolidate. So once something uptrends and consolidates, there's only a matter of time before it eventually starts to pull back. Doesn't mean it has to, but it's a sign, right? And so I should have done a better job of managing, my risk and walking away with profit. So once this thing was trading sideways, I should have told myself break below this channel here. If it were to break below it, there's a good chance it could fall to middle VWAP, so I should cut my shares there. If I were to have gone ahead and done that, right, I could have saved myself over a 2% loss on the 100 shares, right? So I could have still been up on the day, probably $40 to $50. But nope, I decided to bag hold and I decided to literally cut the shares until it was too late. I cut it almost at the bottom, right? This thing ended up, as I cut the shares here, I actually decided to get into SQQQ, as you guys can see here, right? So I bought into SQQQ here and I was in for about 12 minutes and I decided to cut my losses on it. Now, why did I end up doing that? Well, this thing was falling so aggressively, getting rejected by the EMA line, right, and the middle VWAP around here. And it was doing it so easily. It didn't even bother really to find the support around middle VWAP. It just flushed right through it. And so, in my eyes, there was definitely a chance that this thing could continue to sell off on the day. And so, I decided to get into SQQQ. I saw this thing bounce, right? Started change direction again. So, I cut my losses fairly quickly and I decided to get back into TQQQ for one last day trade, right? So, as you guys can see, I bought back in at 1032. Averaged up at 1033 and sold at 1053. So 1032 would have been right around this area. So once I saw it break above, pull on back, and then start a bounce, I bought back into it, averaged up, and then I didn't sell out for profit until this area, right? Once it was, approaching the SMA line, I decided to lock in my profit there. So I was able to actually make back everything, any losses that I got, right, from SQQQ. Because as you guys can see, as you guys mentioned, I was up 70 to 80 on the day. I let the 100 shares run, right? It ate back all my profits and actually put me down on the day. I decided to get into SQQQ. That obviously went horribly, right? I bought in at 53.29, sold at 52.66. So I literally was down about $60 to $70 at that point. And then this last day trade on TQQQ is what ultimately was able to allow me to end green on the day, right? And make back everything I was down. And so I was very grateful for that trade. In terms of what I learned from today, well, when direction is in your favor, right, go for it. Step on the gas when it makes sense. But always, always, always make sure to load off when there's clear sign of a resistance. How do I know there was a clear sign of a resistance? Well, it tried bouncing once, twice, well, breaking this level 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, 8 times, right? So all of these different times, it continuously tried to push above and couldn't, right? And continuously got rejected. That's a pretty good indication that there's a resistance level there, and it's trading sideways, it's consolidating, direction can change. So what I could have done better, right, is I actually played it very well. I think I did very well in terms of buying in and selling out of the shares when things went my way. But where I went wrong was I bag held the shares that I left open to run with way too long, to the point where it ate all my profits. And once I decided to go with SQQQ, I was happy that I was able to cut that trade quickly, rather quickly, and decide to get back in to recover my losses, right? And so why was I ashamed of myself that I cut losses here? And the fact that I was able to let myself have these shares run all the way down here and eat all my profits, that should never be the case, right? You should always want to set yourself up to where if the shares remain open continue to run, it will never eat up all the profit. That just doesn't make any sense. I worked so hard to go with direction up here, and the minute that it starts going south, I got so hopeful that this thing was gonna, continuously start an uptrend. Maybe it would have bounced here or here, I told myself, but nope, I decided till it was way too late to cut losses in order for me to finally do it, right? And based off the past 5 days of how the Nasdaq was trading, the reason why I wanted to cut it here was this thing was indicating signs of an uptrend, right? And it did a pretty good job. Anytime it got close to the middle VWAP, it would recover, right? So what I could have told myself is there's a chance, well, or what I was telling myself was if this thing broke below middle VWAP, I'm gonna sell out, right, and cut losses. And so that's ultimately what I did. But on the bigger scheme of things, what I should have noticed is even around here pre-market, it broke below the middle VWAP for a little, but was able to recover, right? And so I should have seen that, and the fact that this thing was consistently uptrending, right? Direction was in its favor all day and all day yesterday, right? So once this thing broke below middle VWAP, I shouldn't have done I shouldn't have cut my losses very quick. I should have allowed it time to see whether or not it was actually going to sell off or continue to uptrend, right? Because if I never cut my trade there and actually held on, I would have been up $50, $60 on the day, and I would have never taken that loss on SQQQ. But am I mad that I cut it almost at the bottom? Absolutely not, right? You reach a point eventually where you need to cut a loss, or else it's just going to keep on bleeding, and you're going to put yourself in a bad spot, right? So it's always important to go with direction on the day, look at the bigger time frames, see what's really going on, right? Because it can give you a better idea of which way direction is truly headed, right? As I mentioned on the 1 day, 1 minute, this thing was uptrending. Next thing you know, it was consolidating, then downtrending. But if you focus on bigger picture, the direction, what you'll notice is that this thing has been absolutely killing it the past 2 days, right? So and one last thing I didn't want to mention was I don't know if you guys saw, but Tesla absolutely it was doing amazing all morning. Right around 9 o'clock, it died. Right, so it went from around $257 a share, all the way down to $242. So that really sucked to see, especially since the Nasdaq was in the green all day. Right, so you have to do some digging when stuff like this happens. This isn't just natural, right? This type of movement isn't natural, especially with the Nasdaq, right? With the Nasdaq still continuing to uptrend on the day, Tesla no longer reached its previous levels, right? And so I looked into it, and what I found out was that Tesla, well, there was news came out that Elon Musk actually secured his bid for the Twitter deal, right? At around $54.20, if I'm not mistaken. So because of that, Tesla was acted negatively to the news, right? Caused it to tank. And if you guys noticed, Twitter did the exact opposite. So right around 9 o'clock when the news came out, this thing shot up 22%, okay? So it was trading at a price of $42 before the news broke out. All of a sudden, it shot up to over $52. Insane move, right? Super, super happy to those of you that were able to take advantage of it, or for any of you who are holding Twitter, right? Because this thing was taking a bit of a beating the past few months, as many stocks were. And ultimately, this news really brought it up to previous resistance levels, right? So for those of you who were in Twitter and were able to take advantage of that, awesome, good for you. But just keep in mind that we are approaching previous resistance levels, right? It's been rejected heavily right around the $54 range, right? And we are approaching that general area. So you always want to ask yourself, is there more upside or downside to, the trade? Imagine buying into Twitter after today, you hear all this good news, awesome, Elon's buying Twitter, right? And you decide to buy in because everyone's telling you to buy in. Well, chances are you might get wrecked, right? Doesn't mean you have to, but you are literally buying in at areas where it was previously rejected very aggressively, right? The last time it shot up to $54, it got rejected, dropped all the way to 42. Try to test that area again, got rejected back down to 44, right? Tried it again and again, and ultimately it ended up dropping to lows of $32, right? So now we are at these more overextended levels. It would not be the dumbest idea to lock in profits, right, on something like Twitter, right? Even the last year, what you'll see is this thing has an aggressive resistance right around this area. Doesn't mean it can't cross it. Doesn't mean it can't shoot up to its previous resistance area long term, right? But I'm just keeping you guys informed of, what I see going on. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And with Tesla dropping now, after the nice little news that came out, it's not performing too hot, right? It does look like it is headed down still, but there is definitely more upside than downside in my opinion with Tesla based off the year chart, right? If you are looking at it from a bigger time frame, it can be a bit scarier because of the fact that we were uptrending consistently, now we're starting to downtrend, and who knows, it could eventually reach levels of 170 to $200 range, so that wouldn't be absolutely like out of this world, right? Because we've seen this thing would, as it tends to push up, it'll pull on back, correct itself back to the SMA line, right? It had a really nice, surge, and now it's finally pulling its way back. So we just have to keep a closer look at it and see which way it's actually headed. But that's ultimately everything I wanted to talk about with you guys today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you guys were all able to end green today. If you guys are new to the channel and want to ask me a question, just go ahead and drop a comment. If you want me to break down any stock or stock indicator, go ahead and drop a comment and I'll, be more than happy to make a video on it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Other than that, if you guys are new, we really do appreciate you guys dropping a like and subscribing. But yeah, that's pretty much everything. Before I forget, tomorrow I will not be uploading a video. I'm going to be celebrating Yom Kippur. For any of you who are Jewish, you may not know what that is, but I pretty much am not going to be using technology for the next 24 hours. So I'm not even going to be looking at the market tomorrow. So I'll have another video recap up Thursday, but yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll see you guys then. Take care and have a good rest of your day.